Well, hello, and welcome back to Read Becca. It's time once again for my weekly chatty catch-up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading, as well as some general lifey chit-chat. And this was not a very good reading week, or it was a good reading week in terms of quality, but not so much in quantity. I think I am feeling a little bit reading slumpy, and that's okay. I have a whole video where I have talked through how I approach reading slumps, and my thought process and the steps I work through if I'm really feeling stuck in it. And at this point, it's something where I think I just kind of need a mental break a little bit, and to reduce my reading, focus in on watching things that are very low mental energy, and that's what I've been indulging, and that's fine. I have been making sure I sit down and read a little bit every day, but that's been it. So I haven't made a ton of progress. I did finish the two things that I was almost done with last week, indeed. And I also DNF'd something that I really thought I was gonna love. So I did knock some stuff off here. So let's start with the DNF, I guess. DNF is Let's Pretend This Never Happened, a mostly true memoir by Lawson. And I thought I was really gonna love this. This is the only one of her books I own, but I have read later books from her and very much enjoyed them. I've read Broken, her newest, and also Furiously Happy. And both of those are very focused on mental health, where this is more of a memoir. Especially the part I read the first half of it about, and the first half is very focused on her growing up to early days of her adulthood. She got famous as a blogger, blogging about these kind of stories, and so it feels very bite-sized and short, sharp anecdotes from her life, but to the element of it being mostly true. Throughout this, she's constantly telling us, oh, none of what I just told you is true, or huge amounts of what I just told you isn't true. So as I'm reading along, there's so much in here that for me was really difficult and challenging to read. She grew up in this household where clearly she's loved, and it's not an overtly abusive household, but everything she's depicting, there's a lot of neglect and just carelessness by her parents. And they also, her dad is very into taxidermy and picking up roadkill. He does do hunting as well. So them going through and gutting animals, and that kind of stuff comes up very often throughout this. But they also are constantly doing animal rehab, either as a result of things that they did to take the life of an animal, or just having come across wild animals and caring about them as well. So there is that mix of both being a hunter and also conservation and rehabbing animals. And I do get the sense that the family are animal lovers in a sense, but it's deeply frustrating for me, because maybe of its time, they care about these animals and raise them, but they're also objectifying them very significantly. And I think that was very common at the time. So they're not treating these animals as if they're sentient creatures with any sense of kind of their own bodily autonomy and respect for them as a whole being. So I kind of reached my first straw after a litany of things, with a story she's telling about her dad sneaking up gleefully to toss a live bobcat on her sleeping boyfriend of the time. And there's just not anything funny about that. The potential for risk is immense there. I mean, that really is how animals get euthanized, because you decided to take a dumb risk. And yeah, it just is ridiculous. Clearly it's not something the bobcat wanted. It was totally disrespectful of the animal. And fortunately, it turned out fine. But at the same time, potentially, none of that is true. So I'm just sitting there being horrified, and it's tensing me up to hear this story, expecting the worst, because everything that she has been telling us is so horribly overblown, and then really nothing comes of it. But that really knocked me out. And then finally, she moved on from all of this animal and growing up stuff, to her traumatic, extremely gruesome experiences with miscarriages, pregnancy, and birth. And again, it was okay, this is just a litany of horrors, And I don't know that any of this is true, and none of it is enjoyable to read about. Like, I'm not really finding any of this humorous. So I think I'm just going to move on from this book at this point. So that was where I left it, more or less. I have, as I said, very much enjoyed her later work, and I think she really matured as a writer from this, where this was kind of maybe about shock factor, perhaps, is what drew people to it. But it did not at all work for me at this point in time. So onward to the books I finished, which were much greater successes and were both 5 stars. So the first one I want to talk about is Making Money, the second in the Moist von Lipwig series, sub-series within the Discworld Greater Universe. And this was fantastic. This is so good. As always, like, Pratchett just delights. So this Discworld is a fantasy world that is extremely wide-ranging. And this is set primarily in a major city, Inkmore. And in the first book, we followed a con man who is sentenced to death, and he is saved by the ruler secretly, and pressed into service to save his own life to fix up the somewhat haunted and broken down postal service. In this one, he obviously has found his way through the postal service, and now they're looking at banking because people's confidence in banks is really decreasing, and they need to revitalize them. But currently the bank is private, and so they're clearly, like, this is obviously about bureaucracy and government. So there's certain elements about this about going from private to public service. There's elements about the economy and effects on the economy of the bank, the currency backing, so things like the way we have paper money that's kind of not really backed by anything. I really liked that as a person who works in financial markets, like that commentary on how currency really is backed by the confidence of society much more so than a specific commodity. Like, you wouldn't just go in and get gold, and that gold wouldn't be worth anything if the economy tanks. So, you know, yeah. So I think those elements in the main story were all great, and I loved following along the same characters through this, as well as some fantastic new characters. There's a wonderful dog named Mr. Fusspot through this that I somehow forgot was in here, but was great. So I loved all of the main plot stuff, but I think the subplot stuff was what really got me, and that I enjoyed much more. So there are multiple subplots in this about the freeing of golems. So golems, Moist, now romantic interest, I guess, Adorabelle Dearheart, is a leader of a league for golems, advocating for them. And golems are these kind of, I don't know how to express what they are. They're made of clay. They are people, I guess, and they're timeless. They don't need to eat or sleep, and they just kind of work. So there are some analogs to slavery, but I would hate to draw that connection directly because that's not really what the purpose they serve in this series is. But there is this really incredible moment where they're talking about that felt like unbelievably timely right now, really just like eerie timely. What Pratchett always has stuff that's timely though. So where they are talking about the idea of, oh, how great would it be to have this golem workforce who don't need to be paid, don't need to eat or sleep. And then someone answers with why that would actually be really bad, and you can't just lay off an entire workforce without a plan, which kind of hits close to home right now. So I want to read you that little bit. To begin with, they would put 120,000 men out of work, said Hubert, but that would only be the start. They do not require food, clothing, or shelter. Most people spend their money on food, shelter, clothing, entertainment, and not least taxes. What would these golems spend it on? The demand for many things would drop and further unemployment would result. You see, circulation is everything. The money goes around, creating wealth as it goes. Extremely timely commentary on the idea of mass unemployment or AI replacing people's jobs. Yeah, there's a lot there. However, that was not the only very salient point in the subplots. The other one is the commentary surrounding a minor plot that came up in the first book. Or it came up at a couple of very brief moments in the first book and was expanded a great deal in this book. In that, an elderly woman in the first book was scandalized by a golem cleaning the ladies' room because at the post office, because all of the golems are known as Mr. And so, though they are genderless, that was scandalous to this elderly lady. So they designated one of the golems to be a lady golem. And that has progressed now to this golem being given some books on feminine etiquette by the counter girls, and has very much internalized that message. And in the first book, Moist was observing the absurdity of that, and that has continued on in this book quite a bit. And the points made, I just love the thoughtfulness of it. He didn't know how to explain. Even worse, he didn't know what he'd be explaining. Golems were golems. Big lumps of clay with the spark of life in them. Clothes, what for? Even the male golems in the post office just had a lick of blue and gold paint to make them look smart. Hold on, he was getting it now. There were no male golems. Golems were golems, and had been happy to be just golems for thousands of years. And now, they were in modern Ankh-Morpork, where all kinds of races and people and ideas were shaken up, and it was amazing what dripped out of the bottle. So the idea of the socialization of gender is extremely present in that storyline. And it's just interesting to see it play out and see Gladys, the golem, progress through this. It's a delight. So I very much enjoyed this for all of the characterization. As always, Pratchett is wonderful. He just really entertained me with this one when I needed it very much. And once again, the audio was excellent for this, but I don't remember this having been present in the previous one, but it was here. There are weird musical interludes at every chapter heading, and they didn't quite fit for me with the tone. They were fine, but they kind of threw me out of things. I was like, what is going on with this strange music? Yeah, so as always, the narrator was fantastic though. So I will be onward to the third in this series, Raising Steam, as soon as I can. And finally, the one that I'm probably going to talk the least about, because what is there to say about the fifth season by N.K. Jemisin? There have been countless, I'm sure, reviews of this that go in massive, massive depth out there, and book summaries. So I don't feel I need to significantly talk about what this book is, other than to say I loved it. If this series keeps up, I think it would be a new favorite of all time. Everyone that I know who's read it has basically loved it. The things that I would point out that I think I didn't know going into this that I can add to the conversation. It's an incredible book. Everyone always talks about the story being this woman who her husband has killed their son and disappeared with their daughter in a very bleak world where we have seasons that are kind of apocalypses. They're natural disasters almost, but magical. And we know this woman at the beginning has magical power and is very stigmatized because of it. And everyone talks about that aspect of the story. But throughout the course of this, you're not only getting that piece of the story, you're also following a young girl, Damiana, who is one of those magical beings who is completely outcast in her society, and her parents are turning her over to a guardian to go to school, basically, to learn her magic and be trained. And it's a very difficult and harrowing story. So we are following a young person being raised to learn how to use their magic. And then we also are following someone named Cyanite. And Cyanite is also facing a change in life where she's being sent, she's magical as well, and has kind of a mid-level of magic, is being sent to someone even more magical than her to attempt to reproduce. So they both don't want this and are being forced to attempt to copulate and have a child who will be magical, despite all of the stigma surrounding this, because everything about these magical beings is very controlled and oppressed in this world. So you're getting a very multi-layered story from different phases of life and perspectives, and it's just so incredible. I would also say, in terms of the world building, everything I had heard about this so far always talks about the sort of science fiction and fantasy blend. And that's definitely present, like very early on and very quickly, you kind of understand that this is a really bleak, dark world that there's not a lot of like pretty and like lush foliage around. Like, there's none of that sort of scenery. Everything is very, very dark. And so I would most call this grimdark fantasy at this point, though you do know that there are kind of alien elements on this planet. So mostly this first book, I would say, fits into grimdark fantasy more so than being a total genre blend. But there are nods there, and I'm sure it's going to grow as we go along. So I don't think I want to say anything else about this one other than, like, this is a true, like, masterful work of craft in writing. I think anyone who, regardless of what type of genre reader you are, like, if you enjoy the craft of writing and what an author can do with that craft, like, this is something to read and just take awe in, basically, because it's so well done. Just incredible. I think I read this for my in-person book club, and all of us that finished it really loved it, and want to continue on, but also we're like, yeah, I think we need to take a break because this is really, really dark. So yes, we'll be continuing on with that for sure, and would not be surprised if it's a new all-time favorite. So those are the things I have finished. My book is actually sitting right behind me. I forgot. So in progress, I have Thorny Hold, which I just started, by Mary Stewart, and also Starling House by Alex E. Harrow. I have read this before, but this is my in-person book club book for the month of March, so I will be rereading it, which is perfect timing because it's nice and short and light, and it'll be easy to reread that one because I love it. So I think that's all for books. Onward to stuff I watched this week. I'm very frustrated because almost everything that I'm watching right now is week to week. Like, it's actively coming out right now, and that's frustrating the heck out of me because, as I mentioned up front, where my brain is at, I kind of am just wanting to really sink in and, like, marinate in some shows. Like, but I'm starting it and only have one episode to watch, so I can't do that. And I theoretically could go back and watch all of the episodes that I've already seen, but I don't really want to do that. So lots of cooking shows mainly, that kind of thing. But I did finish one thing this week, and that one thing was the Bleak Old Shop of Stuff. I started that around Christmas and only watched the first episode, which actually turned out to be, unknown to me, very appropriate because the first episode is set around Christmas and the next 3 are not, and it's only 4 episodes. So this is a very, very silly British, I think it's BBC actually, British satire on Dickens. And that's why it's the Bleak Old Shop of Stuff. So we are following the owners of the Bleak Old Shop of Stuff, Jedrington and Conceptiva Secret Past. So the first episode, which is the Christmas episode, Jedrington discovers, so he was an orphan who was adopted, and somehow someone finds him and he inherits a massive debt from a family he didn't even know he had. And so on Christmas Eve, they haul away his shop and all his possessions, which includes his wife and children, to the debtor's prison. And he has until midnight to pay off all his debts, or he will never get them back. And so it's him scrambling to do that. Of course, it's wonderful. And then that is his secret past story. The next 3 episodes that I actually watched now are all Conceptiva's secret past. And hilariously, because this is all very ridiculous satire, her story begins with her getting an ominous letter that says, "Dear Mrs. Secret Past, I know your secret past." Like, that is exactly the kind of jokes that hit with me. So, I mean, very easy to make laugh. So it's a 3-episode long journey of falling into ruin at multiple levels, being manipulated, sending away their children. Like, it's wonderful and also ridiculous. But it's also wonderful because of the cast. So I watch a fair amount of British TV, so I know these people. They're fairly famous people as well. So, like, main cast, I think that most people would know of is Robert Webb, is Jedrington's Secret Past, and Catherine Parkinson of IT Crowd is Conceptiva. So they're fairly big names that most people would know. Stephen Fry is in it. David Mitchell, obviously, if Robert Webb's there. Mitchell has to be as well. So it just is a very fun and funny show, while also being all about these horrific, bleak things, very Dickensian, and poking absolute fun at that. So really, really, really enjoyed it. And sad that there's only 4 episodes. So I think that's all for watching and reading. Onward to life stuff. Obviously it was daylight savings today. And that's exciting because it means we're heading towards spring. My cats have been on daylight savings already for a week, so I was very ready for it because they've been getting me up an hour early as it was, jumping on my head for breakfast, even though it was too early. It also is very nice and sunny out today, though a little bit brisk still, but we usually have a weird random snow in March at some point, and that happened on Wednesday, I think, though we normally get it later in March. So I'm not sure if we're totally done, but we are facing an entire week upcoming of like very warm temperatures in the upper 70s to possibly even 80 over the next week. So definitely no winter over the coming week, though I wouldn't be surprised at all if it swings completely the opposite way and we get another day of snow at the end of the month, because that's how spring works in the lower Midwest. Other than that, as I said, my productivity outside of work has been very low. My level of engagement outside of work, my free time outside of work has been very low, mainly because work has been dominating everything. Because I have mentioned this before, I work in financial markets, and obviously everything in the world is affecting financial markets right now, and things are very chaotic and hectic. And I'm trying really hard not to let the hecticness overtake me too much, but there is only so much I am in control of. So I'm trying to, build a barrier around myself and be kind to myself in what are chaotic times for my work, and very time-consuming times for my work. And so I'm not overly concerned that things are slumpy right now, because multiple things are just going on right now that are completely reasonable, that I might need a little energy shut off and brain break in terms of my free time. So that is all well, but it is a lot. So other than all of that, my recommendation for the week, I sort of had a realization, like, there are so many people out there that we all watch, and they're just churning away, doing their thing, and you forget to highlight and draw attention to the things that they're consistently doing well. And I just wanted to point out and draw attention to Book Chat with Pat. I sort of take for granted that everyone must follow Pat, but she has this incredible series of videos that she has been doing and is ongoing, quite a lot of videos out there for this, of books she loved to teach, as she's a retired teacher. And every one of these is in depth and really passionate about the book, and detailed information about each of these books that she's talking about, as well as her own personal context for why she loves this book, why she enjoyed teaching it, and the great experiences she's had teaching it. And so those have been so enriching. Many of those, I didn't go to school, to public school, or otherwise I was homeschooled. And so I missed out on most of the books that she's talking about, other than ones I've gone back and read on my own. I have read Catcher in the Rye, Pat, I have. I didn't like it, but I've read it as an adult. So I think they're really fantastic videos that just about anyone could watch and get something out of. I think Pat's channel, just in general, like, I assume everyone watches Pat, so if you have missed Pat, you should go be watching Book Chat with Pat for sure. She is definitely a major contributor and person who enriches our community so much with her knowledge and what she brings to the discussion about books. So definitely go check out Pat's videos on the books she loved teaching, because they are fantastic. So with that, I have rambled on once again, and I will be back next week with more books. So I hope you have a wonderful week in reading and in life. Thank you so very much for watching.